USB-C cables look identical, but can perform at wildly different levels, and there is no way to tell them apart just by looking. You walk into any electronics store or scroll through Amazon, and you see them, rows of USB-C cables, all looking exactly the same. USB-C to USB-C, same shape, same size, same $10-50 price range on some. But here's what nobody tells you. Some of those cables can move data at 40 gigabits per second. Others max out at 480 megabits per second, almost 100 times slower, and they look completely identical. Today, we're diving deep into why this happens and how to never get fooled again. Here is the core issue that trips everyone up. USB-C is just a connector. It is a shape. It is a physical specification for a port measuring 8.4 millimeters by 2.6 millimeters with 24 pins. The USB-C connector itself tells you absolutely nothing about what it can actually do. That little reversible plug could be connecting to USB 2.0 circuitry doing 480 megabits per second, or it could be connected to Thunderbolt 4 technology doing 40 gigabits per second. The connector is identical. The capabilities are not. Think of it like this. You have a gasoline engine. It doesn't matter if it is a Toyota or a Ferrari gasoline engines. All have the same size fuel port, but one does 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, and the other does 0 to 60 in 12 seconds. The port is identical. The engine is not. USB-C is that fuel port. The technology inside is everything. A $5 USB-C cable and a $50 Thunderbolt cable might share the exact same connector design, but inside, they're completely different machines. Let's break down what we're actually talking about. At the slowest end, you have USB 2.0 480 megabits per second. This is ancient technology from the year 2000, nearly 25 years old. It is still used today for keyboards, mice, and low-power devices because it is cheap and it works. If you are charging your earbuds or using a basic mouse, this is probably what you are using. It is not bad. It is just incredibly slow by modern standards. Then you jump to USB 3.2 Gen 1, also called USB 3.0, 5 gigabits per second. That is about 10 times faster than USB 2.0. Most external hard drives and flash drives use this. It is common, it is decent, and it is what most people think of as fast. If you've ever plugged in an external hard drive and seen files copy at 100 megabytes per second, this is what was working. It is a massive improvement, but just the beginning. USB 3.2 Gen 2 doubles that to 10 gigabits per second. This is what you want for external SSDs and demanding peripherals, fast enough to run an external NVMe drive at near native speeds. If you are doing video editing from an external drive or moving large files regularly, this is the minimum you should be looking for. It is the sweet spot of speed and compatibility. Then we get into confusing territory. USB 3.2 Gen 2 times 2 is 20 gigabits per second using both lanes of the USB-C connector simultaneously. Sounds amazing, right? The problem is very few devices actually support this. It is a standard that exists mostly on paper. Motherboard manufacturers often skip it, and many USB-C ports on computers don't actually expose that second lane. It is fast on paper, rare in practice. At the top end, you have USB 4 and Thunderbolt 3 and 4, all at 40 gigabits per second. This is where you get external GPU enclosures, high-resolution video output, and truly screaming fast storage. This is the realm of the $50 cables and the ones that actually matter for demanding setups. We're talking external GPUs that rival desktop computers, 8K monitors running over a single cable, and storage that screams at over 3,000 megabytes per second. So why can't you just look at a cable and know what it is? Because the USB specification is incredibly permissive. Any manufacturer can make a USB-C cable with any internal wiring they want. They can put whatever connectors they want on the ends. There is no legal requirement to label the actual speed. There is no visual indicator. There is no universal color coding. There is nothing. Your eyes cannot tell the difference between a $5 cable and a $50 cable. The only physical difference between a USB 2.0 cable and a Thunderbolt 4 cable is what is on the inside. A USB 2.0 cable might have 4 wires inside. 2 for power, 2 for data. A Thunderbolt cable needs up to 40 wires to handle all that bandwidth plus signal processing. Electronics. But on the outside, same plastic housing, same metal connector, same reversible design. Completely identical. The magic and the cost are hidden inside that innocent-looking cable. You might be thinking, what about those chips I keep hearing about? The E-marker. Certified USB-C cables contain a small chip called an E-marker that tells connected devices what the cable is capable of. When you plug a certified cable into a laptop, the laptop reads this chip and knows this is a 100-watt cable. This is a 40 gigabit cable. This supports video output. It is like a resume the cable presents to your device. But here is the catch. First, cheap cables often don't have E-markers at all, or they have fake E-markers that lie. And second, even if the E-marker is accurate, your device might not be reading it correctly, or it might be falling back to the lowest common denominator when it detects a problem. The E-marker is like a resume. It tells you what the cable claims it can do, but anyone can lie on their resume. Cheap cables might claim to be 40 gigabits when they're actually 480 megabits. Let's get into the real engineering. What actually makes one USB-C cable capable of 40 gigabits while another maxes out at 480? The first factor is wire quality and gauge. High-speed cables need carefully controlled impedance, which means specific wire thicknesses and materials. Cheap cables cut corners by using thinner copper, which causes signal degradation at high speeds. At short distances, this might not matter. At longer distances, it becomes catastrophic. The second factor is signal processing. Passive high-speed cables can only go so far before the signal degrades too much. Active cables contain small chips called retimers, or redrivers that actively clean up and amplify the signal, allowing for longer cables without data loss. A 2-meter Thunderbolt cable needs active electronics inside. A 2-meter USB 2.0 cable does not. The technology inside determines how far and how fast data can travel. The third factor is electromagnetic interference shielding. At 40 gigabits per second, these cables are essentially tiny radio transmitters, and interference is a real concern. Quality cables have multiple layers of shielding, braided shielding, foil wrapping, proper grounding. Cheap cables might have one thin layer or none at all. Without proper shielding, neighboring devices, Wi-Fi signals, and even power lines can corrupt your data at these speeds. Here is something nobody talks about. Length isn't just about convenience, it is about physics. A 1-meter USB-C cable at 40 gigabits per second is engineering. A 3-meter USB-C cable at 40 gigabits per second is a miracle. And that is why active cables exist. Length adds resistance, introduces interference, and degrades signal quality. The longer the cable, the harder your data has to fight to arrive intact. This is why those $5 USB-C cables from overseas are almost always USB 2.0 only. They can be 3 meters long, use cheap wire, and nobody cares because USB 2.0 doesn't push the limits. 480 megabits per second is slow enough that signal degradation over distance barely matters. You can run USB 2.0 cables up to 5 meters without much trouble. But a 40 gigabit Thunderbolt cable maxes out at 2 meters for passive operation. Want to go longer? You need an active cable, which costs more. Let's talk about USB of certification. This is the USB Implementers Forum, the organization that sets USB standards. They offer certification testing, and if your cable passes, you get to use their logo, USB 20 Gbps, USB 40 Gbps, USB 240W, that sort of thing. Sounds great, right? The problem is that certification is voluntary expensive, and the logos are confusing. A manufacturer can make a perfectly functional USB-C cable without ever sending it to USB if for testing. And here is where it gets really messy. USB has been adding new names faster than they clean up old ones. USB 3.0 became USB 3.1 Gen 1, which became USB 3.2 Gen 1. USB 3.1 became USB 3.1 Gen 2, which became USB 3.2 Gen 2. Then USB 3.2 Gen 2, and now USB 4 exists, with USB 4 version 2 doing 80 gigabits per second. It is an absolute naming nightmare designed by committee, and it confuses consumers, reviewers, and manufacturers alike. And we're not even done. Because USB-C also carries power, up to 240 watts with USB Power Delivery 3.1. But power delivery is completely separate from data speed. A cable can support 240 watts of power delivery, but only USB 2.0 data speeds. A cable can support 40 gigabits per second data, but only 15 watts of power. They're completely independent specifications that manufacturers can mix and match however they want. Let's make this practical. What happens when you use the wrong cable? Scenario 1. You buy a fast external NVMe SSD that does 1000 megabytes per second. You connect it with a $5 USB-C cable from Amazon. That cable is USB 2.0. Your SSD runs at 35 megabytes per second. That is a 28 times lowdown. You are blaming the SSD manufacturer, your laptop, anything but the cable. The cable looks the same as the one that came with your charger. Why would you suspect it? Scenario 2. You want to connect your laptop to an external monitor via USB-C DisplayPort alt mode. You buy a cheap cable because, again, they're identical. That cable doesn't support DisplayPort at all. Now you are wondering why your $1,000 laptop won't output video. You return the monitor. You blame the laptop manufacturer. You troubleshoot for hours. The cable works perfectly for charging. That is all it was ever designed to do. It never promised video output. You never asked. Scenario 3. You buy a Thunderbolt dock for your desk. You connect it with a 3-meter cable because that is what you had. Your dock doesn't work properly. The data drops out. Your devices disconnect randomly. You return the dock as defective. You get a replacement. Same problem, you return that too. But the problem was the cable all along. Thunderbolt at 40 gigabits per second over 3 meters requires active electronics. Passive cables that long just don't work at that speed. Okay, so you are sold a bill of goods. What can you actually do about it? First, look for certification logos, but understand them. USB, if certified cables, have specific logos. If a cable claims to be USB 4 or Thunderbolt certified, it should have that logo. You can verify certification on the USB. If website. If a cable claims high speeds but has no certification and no specific branding, be suspicious. Claims without evidence are just marketing. Second, look at the manufacturer and the price. A $5 cable from an unknown brand is almost certainly USB 2.0. A $30 cable from a reputable brand like Apple, Anchor, Cable Matters, or StarTech is more likely to be what it claims. Not guaranteed, but more likely. Brand reputation matters here because these companies have more to lose from selling mislabeled products. They've built trust over years and don't want one bad cable to damage that. Third, check the specifications carefully. If a cable is USB 3.2 Gen 2 at 10 gigabits per second, it should say so. If it just says USB-C with no speed specification, assume USB 2.0. Manufacturers are required to be accurate, but they're not required to volunteer information that makes their product look bad. The absence of a specification isn't an oversight. It is often a marketing decision. Fourth, understand your use case. If you are just charging a phone, any USB-C cable works. If you are transferring files, you need at least USB 3.2 Gen 2. If you are using an external GPU or a docking station, you need Thunderbolt or USB 4. Don't spend $50 on a Thunderbolt cable for phone charging. Don't use a phone charging cable for your EGPU matching the cable to the job is common sense that saves money and avoids frustration. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth. The USB-C ecosystem is fundamentally broken in terms of consumer experience. The same connector that can do everything also does almost nothing by default. Every USB-C port is a lottery. Every USB-C cable is a mystery. And the organizations responsible for making this clear have decided to add more complexity rather than less. The cure has become almost as confusing as the disease. The European Union is now mandating USB-C for consumer electronics by 2024, specifically citing this confusion as a consumer protection issue. But even that mandate focuses mainly on charging standardization. It doesn't solve the data speed problem. It doesn't mandate that cables be clearly labeled with speed capabilities. It doesn't require that a USB-C port actually do what the device manufacturer claims. Progress, yes. Solution. The road to better standards is still long. The USB-C connector is one of the most versatile technologies ever put in consumer electronics. One small reversible plug that can charge your laptop, connect your monitor, run your external storage, and link your peripherals. But that versatility comes with complexity that is being exploited by manufacturers selling cables that look identical but perform at wildly different levels. The burden is on you to know what you need and what you are buying. Read the specs, buy quality cables from reputable sources, match the cable to your use case. And remember, that $5 cable and that $50 cable might look the same, but they're probably not the same at all. Thanks for watching.